Guys, let's talk for just a second about the people who are posting this study with that's saying that Tylenol is okay to take during pregnancy. And I just want to point out there's some historical precedents for us to be a little bit wary when it comes to these studies that are put out on social media and everything else, because you have no idea who's coming up with these studies, who's putting them out or anything else. And I say that because I want to take you back to Big Tobacco when Big Tobacco was trying to tell us that everything was safe, that everything was fine, and yet we had low birth rates, we had long-term health effects from it, but don't worry, your doctor said it's okay. I'm not going to tell you here not to listen to your doctor, but I'm going to tell you that every person you ever run into should be questioned. We should not just, believe someone just because of a degree or anything else. And I would tell you the same thing of me. Just because I have a PhD or I have a background as a naturopath doesn't mean you should also just listen to me. Do your research. But I do want to address this study called acetaminophen use during pregnancy and children's risk of autism, ADHD, and intellectual disability that people are pulling off of PubMed because this is a fallible study. A lot of your scientific research, it's not great. There's some fraud involved. There's bias because why? Who's paying for it? So let's just talk about this study because I am seeing it posted over and over and over again, and I want you to be aware of what the issues are. So let's start with the study reports only 7.5% of pregnant women use acetaminophen. Global reports are 50 to 65%. That's a huge difference. So their data came from midwife interviews and from prescription records, but they didn't specifically ask about acetaminophen. It was actually lumped into a group of meds. And over-the-counter use, which is how most people get acetaminophen, wasn't actually fully captured. So if many women who actually took it were labeled as non-users, the exposed group is too small, and the unexposed group includes lots of hidden users. So this mixes up the groups, making the real risk look smaller than they actually would be, and which is a bias. So if we are testing the effects of sugar and its effects, or the effects of sugar on cavities, and we don't include half the candy eaters, how is that study? Are we going to listen to it? Probably not. So this study is pointing, this study's big selling point is comparing full siblings, so kids from the same mom, where one pregnancy had acetaminophen use and the other did not. But let's talk about this for a second. How many people do you know change their mind pregnancy to pregnancy on what's safe and what is not safe? Doesn't happen too often. So this controls for shared family factors like genes or home life, and it actually flipped the results to no risk. Sibling pairs where acetaminophen use differs, or discordant pairs, they're actually quite rare for the very reason I just gave you. Only a fraction of this total data actually applied to this group. So this slashes statistical power, meaning the study misses a small but real risks, because there aren't enough samples to detect them. So you have, these are going to be more vulnerable to non-shared confounders like differences in infection, stress, events that take place during pregnancy but aren't accounted for. So the study itself actually admits that there's carryover effects like rising ADHD rates over time affecting later born siblings, but yet downplays it within the study. So women taking this for pain, fever, infections, which themselves might link to neurodevelopment issues in kids. So the study adjusts for some of this, like RA or rheumatoid arthritis, migraines. However, what if it's just a fever? What if it is just a mild headache? We're not going into a doctor's visit for that. What are we doing? We are going to your CVS, your Walgreens, we're picking it up off the counter, taking it home, and we're using it. It's not captured. So any risk might be blamed on the underlying problem, not the drug, but the sibling fix doesn't fully solve the issues of these things that vary during pregnancies. So without randomized trials and observational studies like this are always a struggle because, pregnancy prohibits certain ethical, or ethics within studies. The initial 4 population analysis showed a small risk, which is like 5 to 7% higher, which vanished in siblings, but that could also be biases above at play, not proof of safety. So outcomes like autism and ADD came from health registers and ICD codes, but ADHD and intellectual disability were not validated, meaning that they are not double checked for accuracy. Autism was partially validated, but overall, these rely on kids getting diagnosed, which varies by access to care, region, time period, because let's face it, the study, it only covered the children from kids born in 2019, and they finished it in 2021. Not a lot of time. So the study looks at ever use of the acetaminophen and some dose data. So what this means is there's no info on when the medication was actually taken during pregnancy. So for example, first trimester is when brain development is key. And we know from animal and lab studies that the timing matters for neuro effects. So they found no dose response, which basically is higher dose equals higher risk with the exposure errors, but that's not really surprising. So risks in the full analysis were small. I think it was 0.09%. I wrote it down here. Absolute increase for autism. The study calls them marginal, but in public health, small risks add up over millions of pregnancies. So dismissing them as a confounding issues and ignoring 40 plus other studies that find consistent associations, that's a big problem. So why are we continuing to listen to big pharma, big tobacco, government agencies? We've got to question everything. We have seen this over and over again in our society play out where things were hidden from us, things were fraudulent, there's bias within the research, and we're not questioning a darn thing. And we are ignorantly just taking this stuff like it's no big deal when Tylenol kills over 500 plus people a year for liver toxicity. What is it doing to those fetuses? Why are people not questioning this? Why, out of hatred for Trump, would you push this issue? It makes absolutely no sense. And so let's put our thinking hats back on. Let's go to original sources. Let's actually critique what we are seeing rather than just ignoring it and doing things out of hatred, because it just does not make any sense.